Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the absolute most brilliant, high-stakes, tactical victories in all of military history. We're going to unpack a clash that didn't just end a war, it literally redrew the map of the world as we know it. I'm talking about the Battle of Yarmouk.
Okay, so let's just dive right into this. To really appreciate what happened here, you've got to understand the incredibly lopsided odds on the field. Picture this. It's the year 636 CE, and the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius sends this massive, heavily armed expedition down to the Levant to crush the advancing Muslim army once and for all. We're talking about an imperial force peaking it up to 150,000 men. Just to put that into perspective, that's like an entire bustling modern city packing up and marching to war. And against them, a vastly outnumbered Muslim force of only about 40,000 troops.
So that brings us to the ultimate question, right? How on earth did an underdog, outnumbered nearly 4-1, completely turn the tables? How did they use the geography of a treacherous river gorge not just to barely survive, but to permanently alter the entire trajectory of the Middle East? Well, here's our roadmap for today's tactical masterclass. We'll start with the clash of two empires, then move to the master tactician. Next up is a 6-day chess match, followed by the decisive trap, and finally, we'll look at the world remade. Let's get to it.
Part 1. Clash of Two Empires, Setting the Board.
By the summer of 636 CE, tensions completely boiled over into this massive collision. When we break down the two sides, it's a huge contrast. The Byzantine army, commanded on the field by Vahan, was this giant multi-ethnic juggernaut. Slavs, Franks, Greeks, Armenians. And they heavily relied on armored imperial infantry. Basically, they were a wall of iron. On the flip side, the Muslim army was vastly smaller, sure, but they were deeply united by their faith, and they relied on highly mobile light cavalry. The crucial takeaway here is that this wasn't just a simple numbers game. It was a battle of speed and agility versus sheer, heavily armored weight.
Now picture the actual battlefield. A plateau bordered by deep ravines and rivers. It might sound like a wide open plain, but it was essentially a deadly chessboard. To avoid being surrounded and destroyed piece by piece, the Muslims retreated and concentrated their forces right here on the plain of Yarmouk. It was a brilliant setup. They positioned themselves with the open desert behind them, which was totally their natural element, while forcing that massive, heavy Byzantine army into a really constrained space bordered by these sheer drops.
Part 2. The master tactician, Khalid ibn al-Walid.
You know, the modern airborne general James Gavin had this famous saying, "If you want a decision, go to the point of danger." Well, Khalid ibn al-Walid essentially invented that exact concept back in 636 CE. Abu Ubaidah, who was actually the officially appointed commander, recognized Khalid's unparalleled strategic brilliance and basically just handed him overall command for this clash. See, Khalid didn't want to just survive a battle, he intentionally consolidated his widespread forces at Yarmouk, placing his army at the absolute point of maximum danger to force a decisive battle. He wanted to settle the fate of Syria once and for all.
And to actually pull this off, he relied on his ultimate weapon, the mobile guard. This was an elite, 8,000-strong, super fast-moving cavalry unit that Khalid kept under his own direct personal command. Because he was so heavily outnumbered, he absolutely knew his front lines were eventually going to crack. So the mobile guard acted as his rapid response team. They were designed to just furiously gallop to any breaking point on the battlefield and plug the gap before the Byzantines could pour through.
Part 3. A 6-day chess match, the bend but don't break defense.
This wasn't some quick over-in-an-afternoon skirmish. We are talking about an agonizing, grinding battle of attrition. Over the first 5 days, the tension must have been absolutely suffocating. Day 1 kicked off with champion duels and a failed general assault. By day 2, the Byzantines launched heavy flank attacks, physically pushing the Muslims back. Day 3 was rough. The Muslim right wing literally crumbled under the sheer heavy weight of the Slavs. Day 4 saw a massive three-pronged flanking counterattack. And by day 5, the Romans were just in non-stop offensive mode, desperately trying to shatter those exhausted Muslim lines.
It was this horrifying push and pull dynamic. Massive Roman attacks would completely bend the Muslim lines to their breaking point. But every single time it looked like the Byzantines were about to achieve a decisive breakthrough, Khalid would launch his mobile guard. He'd send them into these incredibly precise surgical counterattacks, rescuing his crumbling infantry at the absolute very last second. It's a true bend but don't break scenario.
But hey, tactics really only tell half the story here. We have to talk about the incredible human element. When the Muslim lines actually did break and the men were forced to retreat back toward their own camps, they were met by their women. And these women fiercely shamed the retreating men, grabbed whatever weapons they could find, and actually fought hand-to-hand right alongside the generals to prevent a total rout. It was this sheer, raw desperation and resilience from everyone. They kept the army from just completely collapsing under that massive Byzantine pressure.
Part 4. The Decisive Trap. Checkmate on day 6.
So, after 5 straight days of just absorbing a brutal beating, Khalid completely flips the script. He lays an audacious trap with 3 master steps. First, he concentrates all of his cavalry into one giant offensive force to drive the Byzantine cavalry entirely off the battlefield. That leaves the enemy infantry completely exposed. Second, and this is pure genius, he had secretly sent 500 horsemen the night before to seize the bridge over the ravine. That was the only escape route. Third, with the cavalry gone and the exit completely blocked, he pushes the massive, sluggish Byzantine infantry backward toward the cliffs.
Tracing the movements of day 6, it was all about the cavalry. Khalid regrouped every single mounted warrior he had into a single 8,000-strong offensive entity. By stripping away the Byzantine cavalry support, he effectively closed the jaws of the trap. All of a sudden, that massive numerical superiority of the Byzantine army, it became a fatal flaw. They were packed way too tightly together to maneuver properly without their horsemen there to guard their flanks.
And this brilliant maneuver pushed them directly into a geographical nightmare, Wadi Yarmouk. This was a deep ravine with incredibly steep, precipitous banks. Since the only escape bridge was now held by those 500 Muslim horsemen, Wadi Yarmouk became a literal anvil, and Khalid's advancing army became the hammer. The Byzantine army broke. They ran in utter disorder, plunging straight into the ravines. It was a total, absolute catastrophe for the empire. Roughly 70,000 Byzantine soldiers fell there.
Finally, Part 5. The World Remade, Echoing Consequences.
Zooming out from the dust and the chaos of the Yarmouk plains, we're really looking at an earthquake that shifted global power forever. Honestly, there is no better summary of this defeat than the tragic, haunting, final words of the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius as he abandoned the region forever. He said, "Salutations to thee, O Syria, and farewell from one who departs. Oh, what a fine land I leave to the enemy." With just those words, an entire millennium of Greco-Roman dominance in the Levant was suddenly and absolutely extinguished.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Why does this matter to us today? Well, Yarmouk meant the permanent end of Byzantine rule in Syria and Palestine. It completely kick-started the Arabization of the Middle East, blending those older cultures with new Arabic elements. It allowed Islam to rapidly spread out as a major global power far, far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. It triggered this massive cultural shift where desert nomads transitioned into sophisticated urban city builders, actually learning from and adapting Roman infrastructure. Ultimately, it was the spark, the catalyst, that ushered in the Islamic golden age of science, medicine, and architecture.
And that really leaves us with one final profound thought to chew on. How does a single geographical choke point, just a dusty plateau and a steep ravine fought over in the summer of 636 CE, how does that still dictate the borders, the languages, and the very cultures of the modern Middle East we know today? The tactical brilliance of Khalid ibn al-Walid didn't just win a battle, folks. It literally forged the modern world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history that shapes our present.